Hello and welcome to another in the series of Café Insights. I'm Andrew Vine, the founder and CEO of the Insight Bureau, and today it's my great pleasure to be in conversation with Sharanjit Leyl. Sharanjit, how are you?
I'm great, Andrew. Thank you so much for speaking to me.
Well, thanks for inviting me here at the Tangin Club here in Singapore. Sharanjit is an international broadcast journalist. She worked for many years at the BBC until quite recently.
Right.
And we worked together, of course, moderating events together. So
That's right, for many years as well.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about what keeps you busy. I know you've got a new role as well, or beyond.
I do have a new role.
Yeah.
In May of 2024, I made history as the first Singaporean Chancellor of a British university. And this is Bath Spa University.
Right.
I spent half my year in Bath now. And what was extraordinary about this role was that I succeeded the Oscar winner, Jeremy Irons.
Oh, really?
Which is still a bit of a shock to me, but I'm really enjoying the role. And it's really about being inspiring and motivating to young students at Bath Spa. There's a very good journalism program there, and that's how I got involved by mentoring some of the students there.
Cool. And of course, we work together in the area of conferences and events. It's about moderating, chairing and emceeing business conferences around the world, many of them in Singapore, not necessarily. What kind of keeps you busy these days with those kind of events? Where do you go?
Gosh, everywhere really. I mean, the last quarter of 2024 was so busy. I was literally on the road, on a plane. I went to Baku for COP29. Again, I was in the UK quite a bit doing various things in Bath. I'm on several boards there as well. And as Chancellor, I'm also involved with the National Centre for Fashion and Sustainability, which is going to be set up by Bath Spa University. Nobel Peace Prize laureate Malala Yousafzai in September in Singapore. This was at the MedTech Forum, and she was speaking about the importance of women's health. We know that she's been a big campaigner for women's education. Everyone thinks of her as a young teenager, but she's also an incredible voice for women's rights. She's now in her late 20s, and what an inspiration it was to speak to her for an hour on stage here in Singapore for the very first time, and I truly enjoyed that conversation. I also had amazing conversations with various other people last year, the likes of Roger Federer. I mean,
really?
He's extraordinary. He was such an inspiration and such a lovely, lovely man. But again, did a whole series of events with him, including a whole interaction with school children. And you'd be surprised, school kids ask the best questions.
Naturally curious.
Yeah, absolutely, naturally curious. And that is, I think, the fundamental thing about this role is, and as a journalist as well, just the curiosity is a crucial thing. Yeah.
Well, you spend so many days getting up very early in the morning to work for the BBC.
Yes.
Do you miss the place,
I do miss it. I mean, it was great being a journalist. And again, when I look back at my journalism career, it was 25 years. I started with the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation in Canada, in Vancouver. I moved to Singapore to cover the Asian financial crisis for them. So I've always been, at heart, a business journalist. Then I moved on to Bloomberg Television in Tokyo, which was their Asia Pacific headquarters at the time, and then moved to the BBC. So 18 years in all for the BBC, working for the business programs. But I was a jack of all trades, towards the end I was covering all sorts of breaking news, disasters, plane crashes, and it was such a responsibility broadcasting, first of all, to millions of viewers around the world, but also, broadcasting and speaking on behalf of people who were grieving, who were the bereaved. So you sense this importance, and the responsibility of your role is to tell their stories well, with as much empathy as possible. That is a skill, I think, I shall always be grateful for, which I learned at the BBC, and I truly loved my days there.
Yeah,
not the 3 a.m. starts, not so much.
But now you're kind of unshackled in a way.
Yes.
You've had the freedom to do a whole number of very interesting things. Some with multilateral organisations, some with banking institutions and businesses around the world. So it's quite a diverse range of activities. We talked a lot about the conference business, and 1 minute we're working with big conferences, especially ones that come to Singapore, where being a Singaporean as well as an international name really carries some weight, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But then again, lots of organisations very quietly themselves need to bring their leadership teams together, and that's where we've worked as well, in terms of internal events. So it is quite varied.
And it, again, sort of echoes what I did as a journalist for 25 years. Obviously as a business journalist, grilling corporate CEOs was my main sort of bread and butter.
Yeah.
But then I also did a whole host of different things with the BBC. You'd go off and do the disaster stories. You'd go off and do all the breaking news that was happening around the region. But you'd also do things that were a bit softer. So, I was also very good at celebrities. So after a while, every time there was a celebrity in town, I'd do the interview. Because I was able to make them feel comfortable, relaxed. They'd share a bit more with me. And I loved that. I loved the interaction with these amazing people who are incredibly talented, but also have such a lot to them. They work so hard to get where they are, and my sense is this level of curiosity where I'm always curious to know what makes them tick, and trying to show them in a nice light. You're grilling CEOs all the time, so you're not necessarily looking for the positive aspects, or politicians as well.
You have to be tough and soft at the same time.
Yes, exactly. But sort of some of the softer stories around fashion, around art, I was always so interested in those fields. So I love doing those things, and I can do all of them. So I'm a jack of all trades. I can do the business, I can do the politics, and I can do the softer elements as well.
Sometimes I feel personally that the role of a conference chairperson or conference moderator is undervalued. Lots of people get it and they do the job very well, but I think it is an opportunity for you to really work with someone whose objective is to make the event good,
a success.
A success,
exactly.
Yeah. Because all too often you get brilliant people on an agenda, but it's no instant guarantee that it's going to work out.
Yeah.
You can't always guarantee that someone giving a speech, for example, is going to say the kind of things that you hope that they would say.
Yeah.
Whereas a more moderated session, you can kind of tease this and make sure that certain things are covered.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I totally agree, and that is such a crucial thing, isn't it? Managing the timing, because there's only so much attention that people in the audience are going to have, and it's the same as being on TV. So essentially what I say to people is I haven't really stopped being a journalist. I've stopped being on television, but I'm still interviewing the same sort of folks, except now I don't do it on telly. I do it on a stage at a conference, and you've got actually a live audience watching you and interacting with you while you're doing it. And I quite enjoy that, actually, in a way that I didn't quite enjoy when you were doing it on TV. You had a camera. It was an inanimate object staring at you and filming you, and maybe you might have the person you're interviewing, but that was the only person you could sort of have a sense of camaraderie with. Whereas at conferences, you've got a whole audience watching.
Absolutely.
So you've got to make sure they're interested, they're paying attention. So what I often do at these conferences is I like engaging the say. I will
I was going to
ask them.
say, it's not just watching, is it?
Yes.
It's actually participating in the full sense.
It's almost like being a stage actor, where you're kind of performing on stage, but you have to make sure that the audience is engaged. And there's a few tips and tricks you can do to make sure that they are.
Yes, and I think, we've just come through a period, it's been quite a rocky period through COVID, where the industry was kind of turned upside down. I like to say that necessity is the mother of invention, and we just had to do it. And then we did it so many times that we got quite good at virtual events. But
that's right.
Honestly, for the kind of things that you get involved in, it's all about creating the experience.
Absolutely.
And you just can't do that unless you really bring people together.
Yeah.
I mean, we did a good job,
I think we did, and actually
through the COVID times.
The COVID times, a lot of those events went hybrid, but it just goes to show how resilient we are. Whether it's individuals, whether it's corporations, companies, we were so resilient. We were able to adapt so quickly to something like that, and still be able to deliver what is ultimately the human experience, being able to talk to each other, being able to share knowledge, and being able to ask those questions and have that sense of curiosity. It continued, despite the fact that we didn't have the live audiences. It still managed to continue.
Yes, I like to think of the moderator role as being the safe pair of hands that you entrust your event to.
Yes.
First of all, things can go wrong.
Yes.
And when
absolutely.
you're broadcasting, things wobble, I'm
things
sure. And you have to
on telly all the time
like
that would go wrong.
It's all very calm on the surface.
Yes.
And so there's that aspect of making sure mechanically it still works.
Yeah.
But like I go back to what I said earlier about being a partner with the organisers, say, what do we really need to achieve here? Okay, I get it. And so let's make sure we engineer this such that it does achieve what we set out to achieve.
Yes. And that's why those briefings with the organisers are so crucial. And one of the key questions I often ask is, who's the audience? What are their interests? And I would make sure that, the questions, the content on stage is really geared towards engaging that audience and their particular interests and what they're there to find out for the day.
I'm just thinking ahead as well, how we think conferences and events are going to evolve from here. We've had that bump in the road when we reaffirmed that it is about the human connection. But it's certainly the case that I think organisations are not just rolling events out like they used to. It used to be this automatic thing, it's September, we do the annual conference and just let's just roll it out. There's a higher sense of trying to do something meaningful.
Sure. The whole ESG agenda is so crucial right now, being able to show that you're doing the right thing just when it comes to things like the environment and the society and the governmental aspects. It's so crucial with the governance as well. Those are the conferences I like getting involved in as well, because I see myself as a sort of ESG champion. One of the first things I did when I left the BBC was go and sit for the board exams and make sure that I was board certified, because for years I'd interviewed these CEOs and I just thought, how can I make a difference? And ultimately, the difference you can make is getting involved in companies and trying to influence the way they think. And the way you can do that is by getting on a board. And there was a big need for more diversity on boards, and lots of studies that show actually the more diversity you have on boards, the better. So I did those exams, and one of the key crucial aspects of those exams was the ESG aspect. And so being involved in the conferences that have that as an aspect and have that as a theme, I think is so important. And that's why I love working with a lot of those multilateral development organizations, the ADB, the World Bank, the International Labour Organization, and a lot of UN agencies will emphasize those aspects. And I love doing that because I feel like it does actually make a difference.
And the other trend I think I've seen is just the way the world has gotten more complex. For senior business people to kind of understand.
Absolutely.
Economics, it's geopolitics, it's about ESG and sustainability, it's about diversity, and it's about technology. I mean, this is the big one. So many moving parts for people to do. And so in a conference as well, that all of those things have to be drawn together.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't know how many conferences I did over the last year and a half where AI was the chief theme. So, is AI going to come after our jobs? Is AI going to, transform? And, undoubtedly it is transforming society. How can you justify that a machine is able to do a better job? Yes, they are doing a much faster and more efficient job, but, they don't have quite the, that sense of moral guidance or that fundamental sense of principles that, ultimately is vested in all of us, in humanity. So I'm always interested in those conversations, and they make for very interesting debates on stage.
Well, I'm sure that the human element isn't going to disappear from the way we run businesses. Hopefully AI does a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of intelligence and efficiencies and everything else. I also kind of wonder the degree to which AI can transform the events business. I mean, can you be replaced by an AI avatar?
Only if the person being interviewed happens to be an AI avatar. I think most people would like to be interviewed by another human being. They're going to not quite enjoy the interaction with a machine or with AI as much as they would with somebody who's fundamentally human. I mean, I'm just talking from my own perspective. Do I want to be speaking to a machine every day? Probably not. And certainly not on stage in an important conversation that's going to be heard by hundreds of people in the audience. But I don't think I'd like to be asked by a machine.
No, I hope not too, because it's so much nicer to interact with a human like yourself and a machine. Sharanjit, thanks very much for spending a little time with me over lunch.
Absolutely.